In 1969, General Motors was officially at war with performance. The corporate anti-racing policy from 1963 was still on paper. Engine displacement restrictions were being drafted for the following model year. The legal and insurance departments were tightening everything they could reach. GM's public position was clear. The horsepower war was over, and GM was responsible enough to end it. At the same time, in two separate engineering programs that GM officially did not acknowledge, the company's two most extreme factories were building the most powerful, most exotic, most deliberately unstreetable machines in American automotive history. Both used a 427 cubic inch aluminum block so light it saved 160 pounds over the cast iron version. Both were rated at 430 horsepower, a number so obviously conservative that the engineers who wrote it down understood it to be fiction. Both were built in numbers so small that ordinary buyers had almost no chance of finding one. And both were sold with factory documentation that went out of its way to discourage anyone from actually driving them on the street. One was a Camaro, one was a Corvette. Both came from the same factory engineering department. Neither was supposed to exist. This is the 1969 ZL1 Camaro versus the 1969 L88 Corvette. Two machines GM built and then refused to discuss. Two cars that cost more than a house payment and ran the quarter mile before most people could follow what happened. And the question that has never been properly answered, which one was actually faster? The story of the ZL1 Camaro begins with Fred Gibb, a Chevrolet dealer in La Harpe, Illinois, and a problem that should not have been solvable. Gibb had been running COPO Camaros for drag racing since 1968, using the central office production order system to get factory-installed engines that GM's corporate policy prohibited in consumer production. The L72 Iron 427 that came through COPO 9561 was already exceptional, but the NHRA's Superstock class was being dominated by Chrysler's 426 Hemi. The Iron 427 was losing. Gibb needed something that the Hemi could not beat on weight alone. The solution was COPO 9560, the ZL1 engine option, a 427 cubic inch aluminum block, developed originally for the Can-Am Racing Series, producing official power figures that Chevrolet rated at 430 horsepower. The actual output in race trim, on nitro-blended fuel with the carburetor jetted properly, was documented by drag racers at well over 500 horsepower. The aluminum block saved 160 pounds compared to the iron L72. In a Camaro body that already weighed significantly less than the competition, that weight saving was decisive. Gibb ordered 50 ZL1 Camaros. Then the pricing arrived. The ZL1 option added $4,160.15 to the base Camaro price, a figure that, in 1969, was more than the retail price of a fully equipped standard Corvette. Gibb's customers, who had signed up for special performance Camaros without being told the final cost, refused delivery on most of them. Chevrolet's central office was left with a batch of aluminum-engined Camaros that nobody had ordered and nobody could easily sell. Approximately 69 ZL1 Camaros were ultimately produced. Some sources suggest slightly higher numbers, but the genuine ZL1 equipped examples number in the dozens rather than the hundreds. Each one came from the factory with the engine bay covered in aluminum components, a Muncie 4-speed or turbo-hydromatic transmission, and virtually no creature comforts because the people building them understood what they were for. Dick Harrell ran a ZL1 Camaro on the NHRA circuit in 1969. His time slips documented what the car could do in sorted trim, elapsed times in the high 11s, trap speeds that the Hemi cars could not match. The ZL1 did not lose its class. It redefined what the class was. The L88 option in the 1969 Corvette was, by any engineering measurement, more extreme than the ZL1. It was also, by GM's own documentation, a car that General Motors actively tried to prevent ordinary buyers from ordering. the L88 used the same aluminum 427 block architecture as the ZL1, but with a 12.5:1 compression ratio that required racing fuel of 103 octane or higher to function without detonation. The factory specification sheets listed this requirement explicitly. GM also mandated the deletion of the heater, the defroster, and the radio on any Corvette ordered with the L88. These deletions were not cost-cutting measures. They were a factory signal that this car was not meant to commute in. No heater means it cannot legally be used in most American states during winter months. No defroster means the windscreen will fog and ice over. The factory was telling buyers, this machine is for the track. The official horsepower rating was 430 at 5,200 revolutions per minute, identical to the ZL1 and equally fictional. Independent dyno testing of L88-equipped Corvettes consistently produced figures between 550 and 600 horsepower. The conservative rating was a deliberate strategy. Higher official figures would have triggered NHRA class reclassifications that would have moved the car out of the categories it was built to win. In 1969, Chevrolet produced 116 L88 Corvettes. The year prior, 1968, only 80 were built. The factory actively discouraged dealers from selling them to casual buyers. Customers who ordered L88s were often contacted by dealership personnel and advised that the car was not appropriate for street use. Some were redirected toward the more tractable L71 Tri-Power option. The L88 buyers who persisted received a car that was, for all practical purposes, a factory race car wearing license plates. On the track, the L88 Corvette was competitive at the highest levels of SCCA production car racing. It ran at Daytona. It ran at Sebring. At the 1969 12 Hours of Sebring, a privately entered L88 Corvette achieved results that the factory publicly acknowledged meant nothing because GM was not officially involved in racing. The fiction was maintained throughout. The connection between the ZL1 and the L88 runs deeper than shared displacement. Both engines trace back to the same Chevrolet aluminum block program developed for Can-Am racing, where the all-aluminium construction was essential to competitive weight distribution. The blocks used the same basic architecture, the same bore spacing, and the same fundamental design philosophy: extract maximum power while weighing as little as possible. Where the engines diverged was in their intended operating range. The ZL1 was tuned for drag racing. High torque from low RPM, brutal acceleration through the quarter mile, maximum punishment in a straight line for approximately 14 seconds. The L88 was tuned for endurance, sustained high RPM output across hours of racing, reliable power delivery through long corners, the ability to run for 6 or 12 hours without losing performance. Both engines were 427 cubic inches. Both produced somewhere between 500 and 600 horsepower, depending on tune, fuel, and the truthfulness of whoever was holding the dyno sheet. Both were aluminum, and both were built in the same year by the same company that was publicly announcing it had nothing to do with racing. Comparing these two cars honestly requires separating the categories, because neither car was optimized for what the other was built to do. On the quarter-mile drag strip, the ZL1 Camaro holds the advantage, and it is not small. The Camaro body weighed approximately 3,300 pounds in ZL1 configuration, against the Corvette's 3,150 pounds in L88 trim. But the weight delta is less important than the tuning philosophy. The ZL1's solid lifter cam, its lower compression ratio relative to the L88, and its single Holley 850 double pumper were configured for maximum acceleration through the narrow RPM window that defines a drag pass. Documented quarter-mile times for sorted ZL1 Camaros in race trim run from 11.68 at 122 miles per hour in the hands of Dick Harrell to high 11s for other competent drivers. Stock trim on street tires was high 12s to low 13s. The L88 Corvette in stock street configuration ran approximately 12.9 to 13.5 in period testing, with trap speeds at or above 110 miles per hour. The higher compression ratio gave it exceptional top-end power, but the cam profile was not optimized for the violent launch of a drag pass. Drivers who ran L88 Corvettes at the strip consistently noted that the car needed revolutions per minute before it found its power band, which is precisely what drag racing's standing start does not give you. Strip ZL1 Camaro. The aluminum Camaro was faster off the line, more consistent through the gears, and tuned for exactly this kind of competition. At identical tune levels, the ZL1 wins the drag strip. Clear but not enormous. We are talking tenths of a second between two machines that are both running in the 12s. On a road course, the comparison inverts decisively. The L88 Corvette's independent rear suspension, its long-distance power delivery, and its lower center of gravity gave it handling characteristics that no front-engine, solid-axle Camaro could match at sustained speed. The L88 Corvette that ran at Sebring was not there by accident. It was there because the car was genuinely competitive with international endurance machinery. The ZL1 Camaro on a road course is a powerful car that runs out of chassis long before it runs out of engine. Track L88 Corvette, not even a discussion. The ZL1 Camaro's pricing story is one of the stranger economics in muscle car history. The $4,160.15 option cost on a car that started at roughly $2,700 base meant that a fully equipped ZL1 Camaro was approaching $7,000 in 1969 dollars, at a time when the average American family income was under $10,000 per year. Fred Gibb's customers, who had ordered the car without knowing the final price, largely refused delivery. The cars that did sell went to serious racers who understood exactly what they were buying. Today, authenticated ZL1 Camaros with documented provenance sell for between $500,000 and $900,000 at major American auctions. The rarity calculation is unforgiving. Fewer than 70 genuine examples, a purpose-built racing machine wearing streetcar documentation, and a verified connection to one of the most successful drag racing programs in NHRA history. The ZL1 Camaro is not just valuable because it is rare, it is valuable because it was correct. The L88 Corvette occupies a different tier. The 116 examples from 1969, combined with the 80 from 1968 and smaller numbers from surrounding years, represent a population of genuine L88 Corvettes small enough that every survivor is a documented piece of racing history. Values range from $800,000 to over $1.5 million for well-documented examples. L88 Corvettes with confirmed racing history, logbook entries, period photos, known drivers, exceed those figures at auction. Both cars cost more new than the factory intended. Both cars are worth more used than anyone in 1969 could have imagined. Both are the direct consequence of a corporation that publicly opposed performance while privately building the most extreme performance machines in its history. The ZL1 Camaro and the L88 Corvette represent the absolute apex of what General Motors could build when the engineers were left alone long enough to finish the job. Both were canceled after 1969. The ZL1 engine disappeared from the options list with no announcement. The L88 was replaced by the LS6 in the following years, a powerful engine but a different machine. GM's corporate anti-performance policy, which the company had been circumventing through the COPO system and the L88 option, was formalized into actual engine displacement restrictions in 1971. The Aluminium 427 program that produced both engines was wound down. The engineers who built these cars moved to other projects. The cars themselves scattered into private collections, drag strips, and race programs where their capabilities could be used without the manufacturer having to officially acknowledge them. In 1969, if you wanted the most extreme factory-built machine that General Motors had ever produced, you had a choice. You could order a ZL1 Camaro through a dealer who knew the COPO system and wait for a car that cost more than a Corvette to arrive. Or you could order an L88 Corvette and receive factory documentation discouraging you from driving it on public roads. Two cars, same aluminum block, same forbidden engine, two completely different answers to the question of what performance meant in 1969. The ZL1 won the drag strip. The L88 won the track. General Motors officially built neither of them, and both are now among the most valuable production cars in American automotive history.